The truth about filmmaking that Hollywood does not want you to hear. The landscape is changing, and this applies to filmmaking, but it really applies to so many areas of the working market, right? And big business. But in this video, we're going to kind of hyper focus in on how it applies to filmmakers and filmmaking specifically. Because on this channel, I am looking to educate myself and everyone watching for the future of filmmaking. So a guy named Daniel Priestley went on Diary of a CEO podcast, and there was a little section in this podcast that I was listening to today that really stood out to me. It really kind of solidified some thoughts that I've had, but from his perspective, it's been narrowed down. And this is something that he has been not only concepting, but market testing, and then seeing the cultural change through the internet and through the changing landscape of business over the past decade and a half. He is a very successful entrepreneur who's built multiple businesses. And so let's go ahead and see what he has to say.
I began writing about what is it that I know to be true? What is it that, like, I don't know much because I've just had the rug pulled out from under me. What is it I do know to be true? What are the most strong truths that I could share? And I ended up writing the book called Key Person of Influence in 2009, and it came out in 2010. And what I felt very confident about was this idea that the future was going to see a shift from business and institutional brands to personal brands, that we would see the decline of big faceless companies and the rise of individuals whose personal brands were bigger than the institutions.
So right off the bat, for me, what I took from this is like, hey, the established Hollywood system, these studio branded names are really in trouble. I mean, we've seen it not only with their inability to create a very high quantity amount of good shows and especially movies in the past handful of years, and with only a few successes here and there, but really he's talking about the fact that the people who consume, the people who watch, are shifting interest away from wanting to support and get bought into the idea of these faceless brand companies, and are attaching themselves to individual people, attaching themselves to brands that are built around a human being.
This was where the world was heading. If we look today, we can see Professor Brian Cox has more followers than CERN. We can see Richard Branson has orders of magnitude more followers than Virgin. We can see Elon's got more followers than NASA. We can see, Trump is way more powerful than the Republican Party. I started that process very murky, that I didn't quite know what it was. It was a feeling or a sense. And by the time I'd gone through the publishing process of writing, I was clear.
And the macro factors that brought that about, what are those underlying shifts that happened that meant we went from the logo to the person?
Let's zoom out 300 years. Yeah. So the agricultural age was essentially, the economic system was called feudalism, and there was lords and kings and queens, and then there was serfs and people who serfed the land. And then technology changed things. You can imagine what it must have been like when 300 people were on a farm, and then they saw 3 people on a tractor. And then that tractor went and went and did the job of hundreds of people with 3 people on it. And it's like, oh my goodness, what are we all going to do? How are we all going to live our lives anymore, right? And then they would have said, well, what are going to be the jobs? Like, everyone works in farming. And it's like, well, there's going to be this whole new system. There will be a completely new economic system called the industrial system. And it's going to replace everything.
I do kind of feel like we're living in that in some ways with AI, especially for creatives, but really for business across the board. With the birth of AI, we're kind of having these similar feelings that he's describing.
If you were a lord, right, and if you were rich, if you were successful, you had vast tracts of agricultural land. But as soon as the industrial age kicked in, you didn't even need land. You only needed a tiny amount of land to put a factory on. What mattered is that you had the ability to organize labor and machinery. And if you could organize a factory, that was way more economically productive than hundreds of acres. So the whole economic system got tipped on its head. And suddenly it didn't matter if you were a duke, it mattered if you were an industrialist, if you're a capitalist. So this whole new system took over. We had 200 years of innovation, and it went through multiple waves. But the important thing to know is that it's technology that changed things, right? It's always a technology shift, right? The fundamentals of the economy are dictated by the technology that we have available to us. What happened around the 2000s to 2020 is we had these general purpose technologies that just got introduced as though they were nothing. Suddenly everyone can publish a video online. Suddenly everyone can write a blog. Suddenly everyone can tweet. Everyone can form a community on Facebook. There's this device that you put in your pocket that is better than a traditional camera studio that the BBC would have had. So the power was just rapidly swinging from institutions to individuals. I'm sitting there going, wait a second, an individual has got all the things that a multinational corporation has access to, but they don't have the bureaucracy, right? They don't have the weight on their shoulders. They don't make slow decisions. They can make fast decisions. So as I witnessed this technology being introduced, I said, the way this is going is it's going to take all the power of big businesses and institutions and just give that to individuals.
That's exactly what happened.
And so let's hyper focus in on what he just said and apply it to filmmakers specifically. And he actually goes into later moments in this podcast where he talks about how marketing a personal brand, right? Marketing yourself, creating for social media, creating to build a business around a personal brand that is focused, and the foundation is kind of on you as a person. This kind of upsets the Hollywood system, because the traditional way that film schools and everybody teaches is that you learn how to do specific things in filmmaking, or somebody, so you get an in, and then you get plugged into this industry that churns out content. And yes, it is content at this point. Like, for years, Hollywood made films, right? But now that we have streaming and the online world and so much competition, films and shows is been shifted into the mentality of content. So it's no longer as much like a sacred piece of art, right? So if it's always been that filmmakers get plugged into a system that churns out content, well, now the landscape has shifted in a major way. How do you prepare for the future if you want to do filmmaking, if you want to be a filmmaker, if you love the craft of visual storytelling, and you don't want to just give that up because everything's changing? And this gets to what Hollywood doesn't want you to know. The secret, the trick, the well-known secret, you might say, is that the audience prefers to support and watch content or movies produced by somebody they care about. They really don't give a crap, at least less and less, about a faceless brand like Disney, like Paramount, right? Even like Netflix. They don't give a crap about those studios. They give a crap about who the filmmaker or the creator is. And just think about it. Some of your favorite films you've seen the past few years were probably creators, filmmakers that you enjoy their previous work, and you watch their film primarily because you wanted to see their next piece of work, right? There are situations and examples where people just go watch a movie because of intellectual property recognition, right? So that's where Disney and all these people come in with prequels, sequels, and remakes. But the stuff that you enjoy the most, the stuff that you really look into the next year, 2025, and you see what's coming out, you probably really get excited when you hear that a filmmaker is coming out with their next film this year. So if the whole landscape is changing and filmmaking is changing, and who knows how Hollywood is going to pivot to try to solve this problem, the real question you should be asking yourself is, if you're not already deeply connected into the Hollywood system, or even if you are, how can you pivot to best benefit you and your filmmaking ambitions for the future of filmmaking and what that's going to look like? What this guy recommends, and what I've said it on multiple videos on this channel, is that filmmakers need to get very comfortable with creating content for places like YouTube, creating long form videos that are lower effort than a film, so they can start building their personal influence. They can start building an audience that's baked in to care about the films that you're going to create. Try to think of it this way. If you are going to be a filmmaker and you want a studio to fund your film, well, the future of filmmaking is probably going to look less like a studio and more like a person's brand, right? A person's brand is funding your film, not necessarily a studio name. Now, a person might be the selling point of a studio. If you know anything about the financial world, you probably heard the name Dave Ramsey. Well, his company has so much production. They make so many products. They have so many shows and different types of content and courses and conferences, and their company is a big business company, Ramsey Solutions. However, if you look at how the company started and how it's been built, it's all been built on the Ramsey personalities, starting with Dave Ramsey, and then a part of his legacy is building out the Ramsey personalities. So people have buy-in to Ramsey Solutions, the company, because it has a foundation of people that the audience can trust. The entertainment filmmaking world is probably going to look very similar. There's going to be studios that are created and very publicly front-facing as personality. And so the real question is, do you want to be a person that starts a studio, and maybe that's because you have more entrepreneurial ambitions, or maybe you just want to get plugged in and make films and be funded by someone else? Either way, it's going to happen in the world of social media, brand, personal brand building. It's not going to necessarily be through the avenue of these major faceless corporations. Hollywood may stick around for a long time, but the way we know Hollywood today is definitely dying a very slow and painful death at the moment. And so if you are young, if you have ambitions to be a filmmaker, really consider starting to build a brand on YouTube. Sometimes filmmakers struggle with this. They just want to spend all their time making films. But what I would say is that you really should put your energy into doing both. Make films and create lower effort content so that you have a regular upload schedule and you can have regular market tested ideas put out there. And over time, you will grow your personal brand, grow your influence, and then people will start showing up for the films you do make because they've gotten to know you. That's the future of filmmaking. That's what Hollywood is so afraid of. And the people that aren't a part of Hollywood, or people that have ambitions to get out of Hollywood but still be in the filmmaking world, they're going to be the pioneers of this new landscape of filmmaking. Let me know down in the comments what you think of my analysis of this podcast clip, and like the video so you'll see more videos just like this in the future.